Everyone is afraid of different things, so before we get started, I just want to state that this list is what I think at this point in time are objectively the best horror games that I've played. The ones that either had the most impact or achieved what they set out to do the best, not necessarily the scariest. There will definitely be another list in the future, as there are so many other experiences out there to have. Number 10. Alien Isolation.
This is the commercial vessel Torrens out of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, registration number MSV7760, calling Sevastopol Traffic Control. We're carrying 3 passengers on a Wayland.
Tawny Bond, you're holding the Nostromo flight recorder unit. We request immediate permission to transfer the passengers portside over. Hello, Marshal? Marshal, this is the Torrens. Say again?
Alien Isolation takes place shortly after the events of the first film and puts you in the shoes of Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter. Ellen, the protagonist of the original film, has disappeared, and Amanda ends up travelling to Sevastopol Station after receiving news that a flight recorder containing their information on her mother's whereabouts would be there. The game is an extremely stressful experience that some argue goes on for too long, pitting you in a game of cat and mouse against the formidable alien, with the focus being on stealth. It's nail-biting, hiding from the extremely powerful and intelligent creature, but the gameplay holds up throughout the entire experience, even if it gets a bit of a slog towards the end. Where it excels is in its environments and fan service sections, where it recreates the scenery of the film, and even nails the tension and eerie creepiness of exploring the alien planet. Alien Isolation is a stressful experience where your survival pivots on how few mistakes you make. Number 9. S.T.A.L.K.E.R, Shadow of Chernobyl.
This one seems to be alive. What a lucky guy. At least death would have saved him from the dreams.
S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a first-person shooter game where you explore an alternate take on the Chernobyl exclusion zone with some fantastical elements. You play as the Marked One who was found alive after being in an accident on a body transport vehicle, and you awaken with a mark on your arm and a PDA that tells you to kill a man named S.T.A.L.K.E.R. The zone itself acts as a living, breathing entity, as does its inhabitants, but what puts Shadow of Chernobyl on this list is the atmosphere and the combat. The atmosphere of the zone feels vast and mysterious. Even on my 4th or so playthrough, it still manages to feel like a wild and untamable beast with its unpredictable mood swings and hostile anomalies. And then there's the gameplay, with its twitch reaction combat against not just other humans, but horrible mutations that lurk in the dark corners of the zone. Regular gunfights turn into terrifying skirmishes as you can be killed in an instant, and enemies sneak around silently, which raises the tension to an unbelievable high. Shadow of Chernobyl is both a deeply atmospheric but sometimes terrifying game. Number 8. Detention. Set in 1960s Taiwan in an era called the White Terror when the country was under martial law, Detention is the sad story of Rei, a high school girl who becomes trapped in some alternate reality and pieces together things she's forgotten to remember how she got here. The game's atmosphere and story steal the show here with this gorgeous 2D side-scroller. Its atmosphere comes from the oppressive feeling of the time it was set in, but also the Taiwanese spiritual elements and enemies that have a foreign air of the supernatural that's so different from what we've become accustomed to. The story is so achingly sad but told in such a personal but abstract way that it feels you can never understand the events that transpire. Pair this with a deeply spiritual dark ambient soundtrack and you've got Detention. Number 7. PT. For a playable teaser, PT has achieved more in its short lifespan than some franchises have over decades. You walk through a seemingly endless looping set of corridors that present bizarre and abstract puzzles for you to solve as you loop around and descend deeper into madness, all whilst the overbearing feeling that something is horribly wrong with both you and reality pervades. Where the game hits its high points are its uniquely scary moments with a lot of misdirection and things like Lisa, the antagonist's shadow, being cast behind the player in real time, baiting them to turn around and face what's behind them, forcing them into a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. PT also just benefits from being really strange, with a fetus crying in the bathroom sink and a swinging, blood-leaking fridge hanging from above. PT is a brief but unique experience that hasn't really been matched to this day. Number 6. Lost in Vivo. Lost in Vivo is the story of a person who follows their therapy dog into a tunnel and enters a hellscape that keeps descending. The game doesn't give the player more than a few moments before messing with them, with both deeply atmospheric sections of winding and twisting corridors, and horrific monsters and bewildering moments of pure fear. Lost in Vivo tries its hand at most horror tropes and does them exceedingly well, but it excels at messing with the player. This is one of the games I'd recommend you try, as saying any more about it would ruin the experience. Number 5. Fatal Frame 2.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Fatal Frame 2 follows twin sisters Mayu and Mio as they stray into the darkened world of the Forgotten Village, which exists on a perpetual night of a ritual gone wrong.
Mayu?
After finding the camera obscura which exorcises ghosts by taking a picture of them, the two girls try and find a way to lift the curse and escape the village.
What was that?
Fatal Frame 2 works on the basis of the original game and presents a more accessible experience with bigger standout moments, more iconic ghosts, and some really deeply creepy environments and situations. The story is easier to uncover and the diary entries are really great in this one, if a little repetitive. The cutscenes are so creepy it's unreal, and it adds things like the spirit radio where you can listen to the pained words of ghosts you meet in the game. Fatal Frame 2 is probably the best in the series and one of the creepiest games I've ever played. Number 4. Cry of Fear. Cry of Fear follows Simon, who is hit by a car and wakes up in an alley wondering how he got there. What follows is a nightmarish journey through suburban and surreal environments with some of the most horrifically designed enemies I've ever seen. The city is alive with these things. It's an incredibly stressful game which uses the same save point system as Alien Isolation, but factors in limited supplies and enemies that come out of nowhere, chase sequences and many strange and bizarre events that catch the player off guard. It's a long game and keeps changing things up, increasing the intensity and changing the rules. Cry of Fear is relentless, its streets are oppressive and their inhabitants are bloodthirsty and deranged. Number 3. Amnesia, The Dark Descent. Amnesia, The Dark Descent follows a man named Daniel as he awakens with amnesia and finds a letter that tells him to kill his friend Alexander. What follows is a twisted and depraved descent into what a man will do to survive. Amnesia is filled with brilliantly executed scripted events and chase sequences, deeply atmospheric and haunting environments, and still manages to be unsettling in both its story and its gameplay, with you drilling into people's heads and throwing dismembered remains to unseen monsters. It really needs no introduction. It's been a classic for many years and one of the most consistently frightening games I've ever played. Number 2. Soma. Soma is the story of Simon Jarrett, who's uprooted from his life in Toronto, Canada in 2015 to reawaken in the underwater research centre of Pathos 2 in 2104. A comet has hit the Earth, and as Simon walks the remains of the research centre, he begins to wonder if there's anything left worth saving. Soma is an incredible game for not only presenting the very horrifying concept of being trapped in an underwater research centre, but layers on complex themes of existential dread while presenting the player with moral choices so confounding that it feels like it's really testing you as a person.
Welcome to town. What's left of it.
Are you guys alright? What happened here?
We ran out of real food long ago. People have been getting sick. Haven't heard from anyone in months.
No shit, they all think you're dead down here. Some failed evac story circulating at Omicron.
Oh, God.
Listen, son. We're on an important mission, and we need your help to operate the Omega space gun. When it's done, we can all head back up the plateau. But now we need to get moving.
This is all built on the same framework as Frictional Games' previous game, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, with the same incredible chase sequences and scripted events that made that game so iconic, and uniquely terrifying. But Soma takes things further, with what I consider to be the best story in any horror game, and so many deeply disturbing and uniquely harrowing events that it was hard to put it in second place. Number 1. Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 follows James Sunderland as he returns to the quiet town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his dead wife. Confused and distraught, James goes to town to find his wife regardless.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did. Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you.
Silent Hill 2 is the gold standard for the series, with its deep psychological elements doing a number on players since it came out, with its symbolism and plot twists played over an air of sadness, melancholy and hopelessness that pervades throughout the entire game. You feel like you're doing something wrong by playing it. It's not terrifying or full of jump scares, it's just affecting. I said it best in the old review that it's a lingering type of disturbing that can only be conveyed by playing it. There really aren't any other games that feel like Silent Hill 2. Now I know what you're thinking, but we're only halfway through the video and the list is over. Well, as a surprise, there's another list I've got to show you. This is my personal list of favourite horror games, because what I think are the best and what I like the most are two different things. This list is much less objective and just for fun. Number 10. F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R as you play as the Point Man, a specialist trained in combat who is sent to track down deranged psychic commander Paxton Fettel, who's gone rogue and now commands an army of super soldiers. The gameplay is the main draw, with some brilliant bullet time combat and some very still impressive AI to fight against, but it also has some really creepy scripted events, with series protagonist Ulma making her ghostly presence known throughout the levels, and even after my 4th or so playthrough of this game, she and Fettel still managed to spook me. Number 9. Sanitarium. Sanitarium is a point-and-click horror game where you play as Max, a patient in the sanitarium who's trying to remember who he is and why he got here. The story is the main focus, with each new chapter revealing more about Max and his predicament, but also having a self-contained story in itself. And some of these stories themselves could have been full games. The scenarios presented and some of the stories are just so upsetting and disturbing that it's really difficult to keep talking to characters who are suffering or in what must be an inconceivable amount of pain. Sanitarium is creepy, disturbing, and dated, but it's these qualities that really let it shine. Still to this day does Chapter 2 make me feel unbelievably uncomfortable. Number 8. Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame follows Miku as she searches for her missing brother in the ruins of the Homura mansion before becoming trapped inside. I prefer how the camera operates in this game and enjoy its time travel mechanic, as the mansion reverts back to reveal previous inhabitants and their disturbing lives and untimely demises.
What's that?
Whilst the second game might be generally better, the first game has its raw appeal with some really disturbing diary entries and cutscenes. Number 7. Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 follows Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy as they try to escape Raccoon City via the Raccoon City Police Department, uncovering the G-Virus and foiling the mutated William Birkin and the sinister Chief Irons. Resident Evil 2 is my favourite of the Resident Evil games because of the cheesy B-movie vibes, which are at their best here. The tank controls and fixed camera angles make avoiding zombies a real challenge sometimes, and call me weird, but I do like the door opening screens. It's not a very frightening game, but the soundtrack and eerie corridors are unforgettable all the same. Number 6. Until Dawn. Until Dawn follows 8 teenagers as they return to the mountain their friends died on the year before. Despite everything pointing towards this being a bad idea, they become immediately embroiled in more creepy events as it turns out they aren't alone on the mountain. This game is really great. I love replaying this whenever I can for all the different death scenes and interactions, and I'm still finding new ones. It's not terrifying and some of the scares are straight up silly and cheap, but it's good old-fashioned fun that I can't turn down. It's got some creepy environments, over-top jump scares, but it's also really genuinely unique mechanics like the hold still function, which I wished was utilised in other games. Number 5. Penumbra Overture. Penumbra Overture is the first game in the Penumbra trilogy and follows Philip as he goes to Greenland to find out the fate of his late father. After taking refuge in an old mine, it becomes apparent that something sinister lurks below, and Philip is in over his head. This game has one of my favourite atmospheres. The feeling of isolation is extreme, with only a madman on the radio to comfort you. It has a lot of unique events and diary entries that give the experience a very natural feel. Whilst nearly everything was refined in later games, I still prefer the loneliness that Overture provided. Number 4. Mundaun. Mundaun is the story of Curtin, who travels to the valley of Mundaun in the Swiss Alps after the news of his grandfather's death. After he arrives, he meets a sinister figure that leaves a mark on him and spells doom for the tiny valley community. Mundaun has some genuinely disturbing and frightening moments, but also a lot of wholesome content and slice-of-life game mechanics to have you making coffee and eating food to gain strength and fear resistance, alongside petting goats. For me personally, it contains 2 deeply unpleasant things, as I'm afraid of swarms of bees and angry insects and find the straw monsters very upsetting as they cover you in straw. It's a very niche game, but I still really enjoy it. Number 3. Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 follows Heather Mason as she's forced to remember the events of the original game, confront her past, the religious cult, and her significance within it. Silent Hill 3 is a callback to the first game, but doesn't have the raw nastiness that that game has, but it's got some stellar sound design, and I find something calming about it. This is one of the few games that I'd put on just to play for fun. Number 2. Soma. I've already mentioned Soma. It's the only game to make both lists and in the same place on both. Soma to me really is a masterpiece of world crafting and story writing. I find something new every time I play, and I keep digging deeper into character stories and computer terminals to learn something new. It still manages to be frightening after all these playthroughs later. It's hard to overstate just how well crafted Soma is. Number 1, Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. This may be a surprise, but this is by far my favourite horror game. It's not a good horror game, but we don't really get to choose what we like and what we don't. Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare follows Edward Carnby and Aline Cedric on a wild, haunted house adventure where they battle creatures of darkness in a cheesy light versus dark story, with evil twins, ghosts, and science experiments. I love this for its creepy diary entries and spooky vibes. This was probably the first horror game I ever played, and it's left a lasting impact on me. I wasn't afraid of it at the time, and I'm definitely not afraid of it now, but like eating your favourite food is comforting, playing this game has the same effect on me. I would ditch most of the other games on this list to play this game for the 30th time. And that's the list. I'd like to take the time to thank the patrons over on Patreon who help inspire me to keep making videos, and there will be a video just for them up later in the month. Again, I'd like to remind you the whole thing is down to my opinion on horror games, so if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I have a lot more to play, I do not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching, and always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.